you, Joe. And today I'm here with
Dario Nardi.
Dario Nardi. And Dario is kind of a shining light these days in the field of psychological types. So I know that you did like a Google video, so that's out there for people to watch. You've done some other stuff that's on the internet that people can chase down.
Yes.
But I don't know that people know very much about you. So what's a little bit of your background? Could you share that?
Yeah, certainly. First of all, I want to say that there's a lot of stuff that I've done that is not on the internet, and that people should be mindful that the world didn't begin in 1994 when the World Wide Web did. And I certainly didn't either. So, let's see, I taught at UCLA for 13 years, and in computing and also in anthropology. And my background is in systems science, which is part of engineering. And I am an engineer, I suppose, by training, which means that everything is a problem to be solved potentially, but you want to build something with it, you want to make it useful. And I think that really is a philosophy of keep it simple and make sure that it works. And I love teaching. I've done that all of my life, and in some fashion or another. Even at times I didn't know it. I had a friend from high school who I hadn't probably communicated with in 20 years. She found me on Facebook and said, I just wanted to thank you for your advice in math that you gave me 20 years ago.
Oh.
I'm now actually a math teacher, and I would never have thought at the time.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. So
That's
who
fabulous.
knows? Yes.
Now you seem really young to be, because you're a full professor, doctor.
Oh, no,
person,
I'm a
right?
PhD, but I'm not a full professor or anything like that.
Well,
no.
PhD. I'll
Right,
take the
yes,
PhD then.
yes.
Yeah. So you're aren't you a little young? have a
No,
PhD
it's just Hollywood. That's it.
It's the Hollywood thing.
Is that
okay.
up to tell people I'm in my 5th decade?
And you seem to have there's an interesting accent that you seem to have in your voice. Am I picking up an accent?
Well,
Is there a
where would you like me to be from? So
is that Hollywood too?
No, so I was born in Los Angeles, but I did spend my formative years, we'll call it that, in a British school. So I do have 3 years of that background, and when I go back to the UK, then I really do have this really strong, it just pops out after a few minutes.
And you were at UCLA, and you were a teacher there. Tell me about that part of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first 5 years I taught computing, and that was in what's called South Campus at UCLA, and that was not so much for computer science students, but for math students, cognitive science, biology, and anybody else who wanted to get a minor in computing, so that they would learn C++ and Java and some internet programming. And really what it all came down to was learning how to think algorithmically, because that's probably a skill that I think really anyone could benefit from. You have an idea, you implement it, but does it actually work when you let it loose in the world? And it was a lot of fun. I certainly learned even more programming just from teaching it, and at a time when the internet was just blossoming. So that was tremendous fun. And then I moved over to anthropology, and that program was really something called human complex systems.
Ooh.
And so it was a blend of computing, social science, and complexity theory. And the idea was really pulling from my social and systems background and looking at complex systems. How can you do modeling? How can you do simulation of people, not just individuals, but groups of people, society, culture, all of those things, and teaching research methods and so on as part of that.
So research, that takes us right into your wheelhouse, so to speak.
Yes.
So tell me about your research.
Absolutely. So 7 years ago, I started looking into some neuroscience stuff because I'd won a teaching award for innovative use of technology in the classroom with students putting on plays with robots that they prepared and dressed up and moved around. It's a whole other story. Those are on the internet too, by the way, if someone can find them.
Cool.
I had this money, but I had to spend it on teaching or research as part of the award. And I thought, well, the brain, I sort of gotten tired of working with AI and robots, and I thought, the brain is this area, and I'm just really curious. I want to see what's going on. And so I really approached, especially the first few months of just like, what is this? And I purchased this equipment, and then actually developed a protocol and began like a whole research process. And now that I've left UCLA for the most part. I'm still there technically, but as a research fellow. But beyond that, continuing to working with adults and people, the older people, and a whole variety of things, and of course going around the world and not just doing workshops and sharing the insights, but actually working with clinicians and people who do coaching, who are sort of doing neurotherapy. So there's just a tremendous amount going on in Europe, in Australia, in Canada, all of those things. There's actually a really big revolution coming in clinical psychology that's very exciting.
Ooh,
yes,
ooh.
yeah. Yes, and I want to be, I'm not a psychologist, and so that's not, I don't tout any kind of, like, I'm not doing clinical stuff with anybody, anything like that. I'm really there to report research and to actually, clinicians sometimes come to my space and get to see more of what I'm doing, or I go to theirs and I demonstrate some of what I do. I was just in Siena recently, and Tuscany is beautiful even in winter, by the way. For anyone who hasn't been there, I would suggest it. And although knowing Italian helps a little bit, and I am also half Italian, or as I would say, I'm actually a quarter Italian and a quarter Sicilian, because those are a little bit different. Yes. I do have family connections. Let's
you
just
do?
say that.
I
Yes,
see.
I do.
Okay, so don't mess with you.
That's
all
right. But there it was really me coming into folks who already do clinical work, with people already use EEG and other technologies, and so the opportunities for doing more research and investigating and exploring and working with people is just, it's only the beginning.
Well, I'm hearing you, and I know research is your thing, and maybe that's how you play. But do you do anything else? Is there anything else that goes on in your life besides this research?
Oh, heaven, yes.
Oh, heavens, yes.
Yes,
Of course.
yeah. I actually have a sort of, how can I say, lifelong attention deficit problem. And so I really engage in a variety of different, almost seemingly unrelated things, because I get bored with one thing and I just need to move to something else. So I'm an avid fan of music, and I actually did do live performance, but that was probably 10 to 15 years ago now, and just not so much time for it. Of course, living in the Caribbean, I learned a little bit of surfing along the way, and actually I went out and did that this past summer for the first time in 10 years.
Hey, loose.
So there really has, I mean, involved in publishing in terms of fantasy books, game books. I do fantasy fiction.
So like Dungeons and Dragons kind of?
Yeah, although that particular brand has fallen out of favor a little bit, as folks have become, there's a whole insider thing. It's sort of like the war between Microsoft and other companies. And at one time, Microsoft was this big behemoth, and everyone else was like, oh, we're so small. Actually, the tabletop role-playing has really regained a popularity and resurgence, but in very diverse ways.
Right.
So
I love your description of attention deficit and being kind of spread all over. So let me just ask you this one final question for now. What's important to you?
Well, I'm tempted to say happiness, and that's the lesson I learned living in Barbados, where certainly the people there value freedom, happiness, health, joy of living, a lot more than I would say Americans do. And I really, having lived there for 3 years and then coming back to the United States, the culture shock of that was very genuine. Interesting. I also think when it comes down to it, of all the different things that we engage in life or value, that really love is the most important thing. I mean, isn't it? I mean, that's to find that and to hold that is above everything else in life. Yes.
It's a very wise answer, I think. So that's great. Well, thanks, Dario. I appreciate learning a little more about you, getting more of your background, and hopefully the audience is getting their curiosity satisfied. And if you want to go find Dario's stuff, the Google interview, you can search for that and look for him and get as much Dario as you like. So thanks, Dario.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.